Hi everyone. I'd like to welcome you to our session today, Building a Social Science Research Park, a value-based approach working with external organisations. This forms part of the Aspect annual event series and is being delivered by Cardiff University. I'm Emily Travis from the Innovation and Business Engagement team. And I'm also the Business Engagement Lead for Aspect at the university. For those of you who aren't familiar with Aspect, Aspect brings together a network of universities from across the UK and the Zinc Group, with a focus on encouraging social science research commercialisation and raising its profile, sharing best practice and building engagement between academics and industry. And it's with this important work in mind that we join you today. I'm delighted to be joined by my colleagues and guest speakers, Professor Chris Taylor from the School of Social Sciences and Academic Director of sbarc, Dr. Andy Dahey, LMS Solutions Design Director at DSV Panalpina and Director of the Park Institute, and Dave Brains, CTO for Emerging Technologies at IBM. You'll be hearing from them very shortly. You'll have seen later that we're hosting an interactive session and we're really keen to hear your feedback. And there's a chat function that you can use to share your comments. These won't be captured on the video recording for today, so please feel free to share your views. That's all from me for now, so I'll hand over to Professor Chris Taylor. Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, Emily, and good morning, everybody, and welcome to this session with Aspect and Cardiff University. We're going to be talking about the Social Science Research Park this morning, and we're going to run quite an interactive session. So if you can see on the slide, at the very top of the slide, is a web link and a code. And if you have your smartphones or a computer handy near to you, which presumably you have if you're online watching this video, watching this webinar, all you need to do is go to menti.com and enter the code at the top of the screen. As we get into the second half of the session, we're going to be asking and inviting you to kind of participate in the presentation using that link. And your smartphone will ask you a series of questions of which we'll be encouraging you to respond to them. The code will be there on the slides as we go through the rest of the presentation for the first half, so there's no great rush to get involved on that, but it also means you can interact during the first part of the presentation too. So you can leave comments, you can like things we're saying, raise questions if you're not sure what we're talking about. So I do encourage you to use that. It's the great way of interacting with us. There's potentially over 70 people on this webinar. So it's the best way we can manage that interaction. So as Emily said, I'm Chris Taylor. I'm the Academic Director for the Social Science Research Park. The first part of the presentation will be just me going through the aims and the vision for the Social Science Research Park and identify some of its key features. Then I'm going to invite my colleagues Dave and Andy to talk about their relationships with Cardiff University and the social sciences, and talk about their relationships and how they've collaborated with various entities across the university. And then in the second half of the presentation, I'll go through some of the, if you like, the ways in which organisations outside the university can interact and engage with the Social Science Research Park, and talk about some of the ways in which you could contribute to. And through that presentation, we'll be inviting you to suggest ideas, give your feedback on some of our ideas too. So I'll begin. Let me make sure we can make this work. Okay, so Cardiff University's vision is to be a world-leading, research excellent, educationally outstanding institution, which fulfills its social, cultural and economic obligations to Cardiff, Wales, the UK and the world. A core component of that vision is the Innovation Campus, which contains sbarc, a unique and distinct facility designed to create a community driven by creativity, curiosity and entrepreneurship, all focused on tackling some of the world's most complex and socioeconomic challenges. Central to this vision is connectivity, our capability to work collaboratively and in more complex ways to address those major societal challenges. Drawing on the principles of knowledge, expertise and collaboration, sbarc aims to create a unique culture and environment for creativity, entrepreneurship and innovation, to provide new resources for developing our analytical and creative capabilities, to showcase and develop the intellectual and professional talent among staff and students at Cardiff University, and ultimately to undertake cutting-edge solution-oriented research. So sbarc, the building, is a 7-storey building that will be home to about 800 people. Now, half of those will be social scientists and professional service staff from Cardiff University, but the other half will be populated with external organisations. It's a multifunctional building positioned at the university's front door to business and the wider society, combining offices, labs, workshops and exhibition facilities with flexible hot desking and creative and social meeting spaces. The building will house 2 brand new enterprises that are complementary to each other. First of all, we've got Cardiff Innovations at sbarc and the world's first social science research park. Now, both enterprises have been created as a resource and opportunity for the university to extend and deepen its partnerships with organisations from the public, private and third sectors, generating economic and social value aligned to the university's strategy for research and innovation. The Social Science Research Park is made up of many of our leading social science research centres and institutes in Cardiff University. They have internationally leading expertise in their relevant areas, and they all have significant track record in undertaking impactful social research. And on the slide here, you can see many of those key areas of strength that will be occupying the Social Science Research Park, ranging from civil society through to adult and social children's care. Our aim with these entities and with these research centres is to create a community driven by expertise, creativity, curiosity and entrepreneurship, focused on tackling those complex challenges. And we're going to do that through collaborative working, through co-location, a key feature of the building, co-producing research projects, looking at creative approaches to impact of our research, creating a culture that encourages challenge and change amongst the organisations that are represented in the building, undertaking cutting-edge research, design and methods, using and pulling together this wide array and large number of social research centres and all our external partners in order to showcase the high quality social research that is going on in Cardiff University, and ultimately looking for new ways of addressing societal challenges. Many of our centres, of course, already do this, but we'll be looking for kind of scaling up a lot of our research, making sure we make more efficient and more impactful outcomes of our research processes. Now, how are we going to do that? Well, we've put together, and this is quite a complex slide, there's a lot of information on here, but we have a very significant and very detailed delivery plan for how we're going to go about putting all this together. We've organised it under those headings: collaboration, research, occupation, facilities, students and events. And some of these elements we'll be talking about later in the session, where we'll go through them in a bit more detail. But this gives you a flavour of the sorts of things that we'll be trying to do in sbarc. These range from our strategic partnerships with key organisations, the establishment of a third sector research hub where we support the third sector organisations in undertaking research and evaluation that will be of benefit to them, through to the facilities that we're going to have in the building: a visualisation lab, a behavioural lab, equipment for face tracking, for telephone surveys, through to our activity room, policy library, and ultimately working with our students in creating maybe an institute for interdisciplinary studies where we can look at the benefits of interdisciplinarity in our educational programs, supporting students as they go into their workplaces, and working with doctoral research students, organising a series of events and many, many other things. So I'm going to hand over now to our colleagues. Both Dave and Andy have worked with Cardiff University and many of the entities inside the Social Science Research Park for the last few years. So we're going to hear from them, talk about their experiences and how they've gone about working with us. So I'm going to first of all hand over to Dave. Thanks, Dave.
Thank you very much, Chris. Very clear intro. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Excellent. Good. So hi, everybody. I'm Dave Brains, IBM Research UK. And as Chris says, I've worked with Cardiff University and specifically some of the social science folks for a number of years. And just briefly, I thought I'd cover 3 things. One is a little bit about me, where I'm coming from and my role at IBM and how that relates to this story. Some of the work we've done in the past, so some of our history, and then extrapolate that into what I think the future might look like with this fantastic facility and all of the plans that have been outlined. So let me get on with that. So I joined IBM a long time ago. They sponsored my undergraduate degree, and I've been very happy there ever since. Variety of roles, but most recently working in emerging technology within IBM research, looking at the technical side of things. So less about behavioral things, but personally, that's exactly what I'm very interested in. I'm also pursuing a part-time PhD at Cardiff. As a result of the research that we're being funded to do by our clients. We have a 10-year research program that we're working on. And I'm particularly interested in human and machine teaming, so AI systems working with people, and how that might create greater benefit for the team, for the people particularly. I always see AI as an assistive technology rather than a replacement one, certainly for the use cases I'm interested in. But of course, there's a big social element there. How do we work? What do we want? And that kind of thing. So that's what really drives me from a personal and passion point of view. And then from an organization point of view, emerging technology within research has always been about impact and about client problems. You know, we bring technical skills, but we absolutely know that we don't know what the problems of the client are, what the sectors need. And this bringing together of people and minds is really, really important. And this is something we've seen work really well in our relationship with Cardiff so far, which I'll talk about in a minute. So that's really important. Now, from an IBM research point of view, there are 2 sites in the UK, one in Daresbury near Manchester and one in Hursley near Winchester, which is where I'm based, although obviously at the moment we're all working from home, and actually virtual events are working quite well. But the kinds of thing we would do to get, for example, input from clients would be design thinking workshops. So really taking a step back to look at the problem and try and unearth what the problem really is or what the solutions could be. Hack days, really good, short, focused technical events. And these are examples of things that we've done with Cardiff as well. So we do them ourselves. We've done them for many years, but I've got a couple of examples I'll give. So let me move into that section about how we've worked together. So we work on a large client-funded research program called DIAS-ITA, which stands for Distributed Analytics and Information Science. And we are collaboratively working on this with many other organizations in the US and the UK. But we publish together, we research together, and under normal circumstances, so last year, I would be traveling to Cardiff from Portsmouth, which is where I'm based, once every other week. So it's a long train journey, but very useful, very easy, Pretty Research Institute. Now, as a result of that, there's lots of connections with social scientists. So I've done some particular events. So, for example, in 2014, the NATO summit was in Cardiff, and we actually built some analytics infrastructure looking at social media and the feeling that the local community had about that. And we published a few papers around that topic. And then more recently in 2018, in the summer of 2018, there was a policy hack day that was run by the University Police Science Institute and the Crime and Security Research Institute. But it invited people from the police, the fire service, the NHS, the local council, all of these subject matter experts, along with technical people, researchers, scientists, and they were given tasks in various areas like knife crime, alcohol licensing, traffic solutions and drugs and so on. And for 2 days, it was a very intense, focused hack day where we were trying to come up with social solutions. And it was really, really good and memorable event. So just briefly then, moving on to so what about the future? Well, you know, there's some odd things going on at the moment with lockdown. Lots of things are virtual, and that will continue obviously for as long as is needed. But when we do have the opportunity to get back together physically, then the spaces that you have and the way they've been designed can make a really big difference. So I'm really excited to experience when the building is finished, the visualization lab, the behavioral lab, and see some of these things firsthand. We've built similar but less grand facilities at our IBM Hursley location, and we've specifically designed them just like has been done with this building to meet the needs of the tasks that are going to be done there. I hope that we'll get to participate in more hack days, design thinking workshops, and all these kinds of things. And certainly for me, the essence here is, whether it's virtual or physical, is this idea of building a community of people that come together to share their ideas and their expertises, because between the subject matter experts and the researchers, you have this fusion of new knowledge that neither one of those two parties have. But when you bring it together, if you do it right, you can get some really good, impactful outcomes. So anyway, that's it from me. So I think at this point, I will hand over to Andy.
Thank you very much, Dave. And I guess, first of all, thank you to Chris and to Emily for inviting me along to this event. It's I think it's fascinating, this sbarc project that you guys have launched and the programme. So thank you very much for inviting me to speak here. Just by way of a very quick introduction, so my name is Andy. I'm a director at the PARC Institute of Manufacturing, Logistics and Inventory. And PARC is a joint industry and academic partnership where Cardiff University is the academic partner, and DSV, the company that I work for, was the original partner. But increasingly over the last few years, we've had more and more companies and different industry people joining this PARC Institute. And at a very high level, PARC aims to provide new insight and practical knowledge about and to help companies to transition to future supply chains. Now, the future of supply chains is also quite an interesting and exciting topic. It was quite big before coronavirus, and now it's really in the news. But even putting coronavirus to one side, there's some big changes going on with global supply chains at the moment. Thinking first about the political changes, Brexit, Trump, the whole nationalisation topic. Thinking about the technological changes, Dave's already mentioned some of them: robotics, AI, 3D printing, some amazing technological changes. And I think the third one that's really high on the agenda as well is this whole question of sustainability in the environment and how can we adapt supply chains for the future. But I think the reason that I've been asked today is not so much to talk about PARC. So what I thought I would do, if it's okay, is share with you all some of the benefits that I think we've found that's really worked well for the PARC Institute, that's allowed us to take that PARC Institute from something quite small 70 years ago to something that's been very successful, I think, both for us as a company, DSV, but also for the university. So in terms of success, I mean that it's managed to attract a lot of research grants. It's managed to publish some great papers and articles and books. It's allowed us as a company to create some brilliant new ideas in the market, attract customers, win awards, and ultimately make more money. So it's been very successful from our perspective, and I hope from Cardiff too. And I thought what I'd do is just share the three things that I think have been the most important for us and where that success has come from, because I hope that that can help with the sbarc program as well. So I think the first thing that has really been a big benefit for us of working with Cardiff University is the interdisciplinary nature of a university. And what I mean by that is that we first approached the university with quite a specific problem. So we were looking at inventories in high-tech supply chains. And so the companies that make mobile phones and computers and laptops, how much inventory should they hold? And when we went to Cardiff University, we also then got introduced to different departments and different experts. And they started to make us think much broader about this question and this problem. So as an example, we had people from the engineering department saying, have you thought about 3D printing and what impact that could have on inventory levels? Even 7-8 years ago, we were contacted by teams who were looking at sustainability, and they were asking us, what's going to happen if you built too much of these products and you've got too much inventory? Is the product just going to go into scrap? What happens if it becomes obsolete? And what we also found is that there's lots of researchers working in lots of very different industrial fields than we work in. And Dave, that was very interesting what you just presented, so I'd like to learn more about that too. But to give you an idea, we were talking about high-tech supply chains, but we're introduced to people who were working in fashion supply chains and food supply chains. And they approached us and said, we've got a similar problem in our industry too. Maybe we can learn something from you, and maybe you can learn from us as well and take some ideas. So that interdisciplinary nature of a university really helped us to broaden our thinking and get some new ideas into the business. So that was the first one. The second thing that I think was a real eye-opener and a really big thing for us is around this topic of knowledge transfer. I think when I started to work with Cardiff University 7 or 8 years ago, I thought the idea was that we as industry have a problem. We go to a university, they research it, they find the solution and they tell us the answer and we implement it. I thought that's how it worked. But what I've seen myself as well is that actually there's a lot more to this knowledge transfer than just a university solving the problem. And what universities are excellent at, and Cardiff University in particular, has been transferring that knowledge from universities and research and other industry partners into our business. And we're a company of 60,000 people spread all over the world. So getting that knowledge into the business is not easy. But Cardiff University have really helped us with different ways of transferring that knowledge. Sometimes it's formal knowledge transfer programs supported by the government. Sometimes it's with training. Sometimes it's with recruiting graduates who've got specific skills or technical skills that we then hire into our business. And sometimes it's just working together on projects, just having different people with different perspectives coming in and giving a different angle to the projects. So that's the second one I think that the university has really helped us with, is the knowledge transfer side of things. And then the third one that I think has really helped us is around this topic of innovation. And where it's helped us, I think in particular, is around, and it's going to sound strange, but around the contradictions and the conflicts that you get between university and academic people. And I know we've got academics and we've got industry people on the line here. So I hope I'm not going to offend you both now with my next comments. But I think if you speak to a lot of industry people about what it's like working with academia, they will generally say things like, academics, they don't live in the real world, all they're interested in publications, and they take so long and they never find an answer, it's just very theoretical. So that's the perception usually of industry, of academia. But equally, if you turn that around and you ask academic people what they think of working with industry, they say, oh God, you guys, you're so short term, you flip from one problem to the next without really deep thinking and learning. You're only interested in short term and you can't understand the bigger, wider impact of what you're doing. Which is absolutely true as well, by the way. So you've got this very different perspective of how to approach different problems from academics and from industry people. And just that conflict and different ways of doing things for us has been a great way to create new ideas and insight for our team and our business. So I think those are the three areas that I'm sure now are going to become part of sbarc, and I hope that those ideas help you as much as they've helped us over the last few years. And I thought, if it's okay, I'm just going to finish off now, and only be a couple of minutes, just to talk about one of the projects that we're working on now. And actually, it's a project that the sbarc team helped us to initiate around 2 or 3 years ago. So we had a conference in Cardiff, a sbarc conference with Cardiff around iLego. And the big problem that we were looking at, and it really is a big problem, is that the supply chains of today, they're not sustainable for the planet that we live on. It's as simple as that. The way that we do things today, it cannot carry on like this. So what we think is that companies now have really got to address that problem. They've got to think of different ways that they can design the products, that they can make the products, that they can deliver and sell the products, but increasingly how they can bring those products back, how they can reuse them, repair them, remanufacture them. So there's a responsibility for companies and industry to do something. But equally, there's a consumer and a societal change that needs to happen. And we as consumers, and you and me, we need to think about the way that we buy products, the selections that we make, and particularly the trade-offs between sustainability, speed, cost, and also what we do as consumers when we finish with those products. How do we think of how we can repair them, remanufacture them, and reuse them? So I think this is genuinely a huge problem, but I think it's a very interesting and very exciting problem that's of interest for us all. And I think that's what really this new project that we're working on, which is our Remakerspace project, which is hoping to bring together both businesses and consumers to develop this new circular supply chain business model of the future. And I think from our perspective, the Remakerspace, it aims to bring in students, it aims to bring in industry partners, it aims to bring in governments, it aims to bring in researchers. So I see a lot of parallels with what sbarc and what you guys are trying to do as well. We've got very big ambitions. So we've got some funding. We're going to have a centre at Cardiff University. We've got access to 3D printing equipment. We've got access to all types of equipment where people will be able to come in and actually see and touch and feel some of these products. So really get people thinking about how can we design, how can we remanufacture, how can we repair some of these products that we all see every single day. So we've got some very big ambitions for Remakerspace, and I know Chris and the team have got some very big ambitions for sbarc. So we're really looking forward to working with you guys over the next few months, weeks and years to bring those ambitions to life. So thank you very much. Back to you, Chris.
That's brilliant. Thank you ever so much, guys. They were excellent presentations. And I think you'll all agree with me, some really interesting examples there of the ways in which we can work together across different sectors, working towards common causes. Some great ideas there, like the hack days, the remaker space, and things like that. I think also it's worth drawing on Andy's views about those different perspectives that different sectors have of each other. And of course, what we're trying to do in sbarc is to create an environment and a space where we can work together through co-location to build trust amongst each other, in order then to be able to safely and securely challenge and change the way in which we all go about the ways we do our own respective bits of the work. And that's what the whole point of the membership of the Social Science Research Park is going to be. So before we go into the next session, I just want to remind you again, if you haven't done so already, if you get your smartphone at hand, open a browser, type in menti.com. It will take you to a simple page, which will ask you to enter a code. The code we need to enter is 2051531, which is on the slide that you should be able to see. And through that, you'll be able to interact with the rest of the presentation in some way. So there are going to be various points in the process where I'm going to ask you to answer questions, provide comments, give some feedback. We are going to store that and keep that data, but I remind you that this is all anonymous. We're not asking you to name yourself, so that we don't know any information about you from doing this process, but we will be able to use this information to help inform the way in which we go about the next steps. sbarc at the building, for anybody who's kind of locally based in Cardiff will know, it's under construction at the moment. The main frame of the building is completed, and we're due to be finished by the early autumn of next year, COVID dependent, of course. But this is the right time now to begin to start talking to external organisations and individuals about how they can be part of the Social Science Research Park, how you can become a member of it. And so that's what we're going to go through for the remainder part of this presentation. So what will the membership and who will be the members of sbarc? And of course, in some extent, we want to remain very flexible and adaptive to the different and changing circumstances and to various opportunities that might arise. So the door is open, in effect. We are a gateway to the university in that way, and there will be people in post who will be able to have those conversations with externals about the possible and potential relationships they might have with the university. But this slide kind of outlines what I think are some of the main ways in which we might want to interact with sbarc. So you may be research partners, organizations or individuals using research, which might include policy and practice, umbrella bodies who represent other organizations and represent those communities that exist outside the university. You may be interested in knowledge exchange and knowledge mobilization rather than actually using the research. So you're one of the organizations which helps facilitate the transfer of knowledge around the sectors that you work in. You may be visiting academics. You may be organizations who collect enormous amounts of data that you want to share with others in order or to have support from others in using that data to make better and more informed decisions. You might be developing new technological uses for research or in education even. You may be researchers independent of the university. And of course, you may be users of research who are developing commercial solutions. And membership you may have a number of these characteristics rather than just one or two of them. And in a minute, I'm going to ask you to identify which ones you are. So on this next slide, this is where we begin the interaction. So if you're on your smartphone, you should be able to now choose, and you can choose any of the multiple partners, indicate which ones you think you are. So I'll give you a couple of minutes or a couple of seconds really to identify on this slide which of those kind of partners you probably best represent. I hope what we like about this, of course, is you can see the answers. So you can see the breadth of the audience that is both in this call, the wide range of interests that we might all have. Nobody necessarily has the same potential interest in Spark, but there may be certain kinds of commonalities between us. So as we can see already, quite a large proportion, relatively large proportion, interested in knowledge exchange and mobilization. Quite a lot of people are users of research, but many people see themselves as researchers and research partners who are hoping to kind of co-produce the research that we might be doing in the social science research part. Okay, that's great. So we'll keep going. We can keep collecting these things. Yeah, charity organisations, third sector organisations can become members. That's absolutely right. And members of the public can become members as well. Yeah, I mean, we have to kind of consider what the role is and what your contribution will be. And as we'll go into that, we'll see what that relationship looks like in a second and how you get involved in it. So membership, we've been developing a kind of methodology, a membership model for how we might, if you like, systematically engage with external organizations. And we've come up with what we think is the best solution for that. Although, again, this is still work in progress. And this is why the purpose of the session is to get some feedback on this. And we basically come up with a membership model, which in effect has two key elements to it. The first part is a membership fee, and that fee is dependent on the level of occupancy an organization or individual will have in the building. And so the more space you need, the bigger the fee. But by having a bigger fee, of course, you're using more of the core services that Spark can offer to you. And so with that membership fee, you include various core services, and I'll go through what those are in a minute. The second part, though, is this value contribution. And this is where we think the best way of doing this is almost on a one-to-one basis, where we negotiate it with each potential partner. Typically, this comes in the form of in-kind or non-monetary contributions. And it's a way in which we work out what you get from us and what we might expect from you. And so this is a value contribution, and we have to kind of develop some sort of methodology for this, because we need to ensure there's fairness amongst all our partners, that they're all contributing relatively the right amounts given what they're going to receive in response. So some questions already on here. So will that membership fee include contributions to funding and support? So they're the sort of things that we can put into the membership model if we think they're useful. So two key elements to it, and I'm going to go through first of all the core services. If you like, what do you get for paying the fee for occupation in the building? So this is a table with, if you like, 5 different types of occupancy an organization or individual might have. And in the rest of the table, we've started to sketch out things like the length of occupancy, indicative costs, and some sort of cost equivalence, so you can calculate how they compare per working day. We've identified 5 different types of occupancy at the moment. And this is the starting point, remember. We still have a value contribution, which we'll come on to in a second. In terms of the 5 types of occupancy, then we've got dedicated desks. This is where an organization or individual will be given an allocated space inside the building. That will be their desk or desks, as many as you need. And that will always be yours for the duration of the kind of membership of the building. The second and third examples are hot desking. So this is where you will have access to space within the building. It won't be your desk, and you'll have to come into a space where there'll be some availability of spaces for desks, and you would come and use them wherever they are available and free to use. And we've got 2 types of hot desking based on, if you like, rather the level of use you might want to use. So hot desking 24/7, where you don't want a dedicated desk, but you want to be able to use it at any time in the week, at any time of the day. And then there's another one where it's only maximum of 35 hours per calendar month of use of it. So it gives you a kind of limited use of the hot desking, but of course you pay significantly less money for that space. We've also started to consider, particularly as a result of COVID, our virtual membership and what that might look like. We've yet to decide fees for that, because of course we're no longer using occupation. It's more about access to the facilities, but we can distinguish here between virtual membership, where you want access to the facilities and what's inside the building, but you don't need a desk, versus virtual access where you might only just simply want to come in for events and do various joint activities with us, but you don't need to use the facilities in the building, like book rooms and things like that. So what do the core services look like for that occupation? So this is for those that will be occupying the building. These are just an example, a list of the things that we can offer: dedicated mailboxes, storage space, meeting spaces, the on-site cafe, Wi-Fi, tea making facilities. We'll have a sbarc community manager, somebody who's in post, who will be there to work with partners, who will be able to be the broker, if you like, for arranging networking and partnerships with other organizations within the university and within the sbarc. Access to our social activities, joining in with the social events that go on inside the building. Again, one of the key elements of the building is to find ways in which people can interact with one another, not necessarily in work-related activities, but also in social activities too. Again, a key part of the way in which we might build trust and cooperation with one another. And of course, having formal representation on things like the building users group, so you can inform decisions about how the building works and functions, how it's sustained, and how sustainable the building is, and various other aspects of the facility. So I'm interested at this point for colleagues on this call to begin to indicate whether you see which of these 5 different types of membership you'd probably be most interested in, simply just to give us a gauge and a level of interest across these 5. So if you have to, again, if you're on your smartphone, it will have moved on to the next slide. You just need to indicate which one you want. So if you just go to the slide, it'll say go to the next slide. You can put very likely, not very likely. You might not be sure at this moment. So you just use the sliders to indicate where you think your interests would be in terms of occupation. So again, this is a very useful way for us to begin to understand the different demands on the space and the different types of membership and the membership fee, particularly, that we might be working with. And of course, the more occupation you have within the building, the more likely you're going to build relationships quicker and more effectively, and therefore being able to engage in the research we're going to be undertaking. However, we also recognize that some relationships may just begin in a very slow and very careful way. And that in time, those relationships may change and your membership may change as well during the course of your interaction with the Social Science Research Park. Great. Okay, we'll move on. Thank you very much. So this is the social. This is about the research elements and facilities within the building. I've got time to just quickly go through some of these. So again, on this slide, I'm interested to what extent you might be interested in using these facilities. These are some of the key research facilities of the building, and to again gauge how much interest there is in them and what the demand might be for them. So I'll quickly go through them, and you can begin to vote for them if you want to. The first of all is the Secure Data Hub. So this is a facility where you can access what we consider to be sensitive and secure data. It's a facility which means that the people who provide the data can be confident that the people accessing the data are going to use it in the most appropriate way. Data cannot be removed, for example, from the building. You can't take anything away from the rooms. You can't even write things down in the rooms. You basically submit your outputs to a specially approved panel, and they will then agree or not whether you can take that data out of view. So that might be a facility that people put in and maybe put their data into, for example. The Third Sector Research Hub. This is, if you like, the beginnings of a way in which we might support particularly the third sectors and charity organisations in helping them do their research to inform their decisions about how they operate and what services they provide. So we'll be drawing upon all experts within the building to support that Third Sector Research Hub. Our specialist research labs and facilities, we've got some really exciting spaces inside the building. The visualization lab you've heard from Dave earlier, the behavioural lab, focus group rooms for recording and observing focus groups, the Remaker Space Centre, which allows us to interact with some of those remaking, redesigning things like 3D printing. Fourthly, then we've got the policy library. This is a small facility within the building where, if you think of all those research centres undertaking lots of research which has policy relevant outputs, this is a place in which we can go very easily and access that information, that library. Obviously, then we've got the research and methodological expertise of academics in the building, what they might be able to provide for you. Then there's the substantive expertise in their respective areas, whether it be around health behaviours or climate change behaviours, for example. And then obviously we've got the university's training and capacity building activities, and particularly the training that sbarc and our partners will be undertaking and providing, and be able to access those kinds of activities for your benefits. So again, it's really useful to see here, there's a lot of interest in the Third Sector Research Hub, which I think is great news. And clearly the benefits are about training and accessing that research expertise that we will be able to offer to you. So that's great. Okay, let's move on. So these are just some of the ways in which we could imagine some collaboration between the university centres, research centres and research institutes and external organisations. These are just an indicative list. I'm going to then invite you later to suggest other ways in which we might do this. And again, I'd be interested at this point for you to indicate whether you're very interested or not very interested in these kinds of collaborative activities. So it may be, for example, getting involved in academic research projects, actually being involved side by side with the researchers, working on a common research design and research project. Having academics, researchers involved in your activities, supporting you in what you're doing. Working with our students. Of course, we've got some very capable and talented undergraduate and postgraduate students in the university, many of whom will be working alongside research centres. Do you want to be working with those on projects, both their projects or with them working on your projects? We're also quite keen to set up secondment schemes. So we could second academics from our side to your organisation, and equally and reciprocately, you could second staff to our research centres. So we can work together in more structured and formal ways. Then there's opportunities to sponsor and fund research activities. Now that might be where you're sponsoring our research activities, but it may also be in where we can support you and your research activities, and all sorts of different forms of support, financial support and resource support we can give you. Sharing data. Again, many organisations have large-scale uses of administrative data, which are largely untapped in terms of research purposes and research uses. And we're keen to develop conversations with you about how we might be able to use your data in order for you to make better use of that data for your own purposes, but also how it might inform the research that we might be doing too. Then we've got contributing to the impact research. This is about, if you like, once research has been completed, how do we disseminate it? How do we get it out there in the field? How do we make change in society, as well as being able to, as Andy mentioned before, that theoretical work we might do, actually then applying it and how we might do that in more effective ways, to contributing to that. And then lastly, and kind of very importantly as well, developing a collaborative model for how we inform the curriculum that we offer within the university. So this is both you contributing to the curriculum design of our undergraduate and postgraduate modules and courses, but also how you might be involved in delivering some of that too, and being involved in that process, which I think will improve the quality of the education experience for our students, but also means that you can be more confident that students leaving the university on various programs have a certain particular set of skills and expertise and knowledge that they've gained because you were part of the design of that curriculum material. So again, a very exciting opportunity, I think, for being involved in a long-lasting kind of impact. So very good to see some response to this. So we've got some really interesting ideas about particularly involving the students in the curriculum and contributing to the impact research. So that's really good to see. So thanks for that. So we're going to go on now, and this is already beginning, if you like, to shape what a value contribution might look like between us and our partners. And in the next few slides, I'm going to invite you to start suggesting ways in which you think you can contribute and then the ways in which you think you might benefit from being a member of sbarc. So the next few slides are very interactive. I'm going to invite you to suggest comments and suggest ideas as well that perhaps haven't been mentioned so far. So the first one is the value contribution of sbarc. So if you're opening your Mentimeter on your smartphone, if you've got this here, you'll be given a question now about what 3 things would you like to receive for being a member of sbarc? So this is the value contribution of sbarc to you. So again, you can enter one word or a line or a sentence. And what we should start to see is people start writing their ideas and what they think are the 3 most important things they want to get from us for being a member. They'll start to appear on the slide for us. So I invite you to start writing those out and then submit those. We'll have a couple of minutes on this. Great. So as you should be seeing on the slide, you're beginning to see the word cloud that emerges from these suggestions. So collaboration very much at the heart of what everybody seems to be wanting from us. But we've got there things like some really interesting things about honesty I saw earlier, insight and access, domain knowledge, interdisciplinarity, scholarships, I think is a really good idea as well. The commercial opportunities that we've got to develop. I mean, it would be my view that social sciences, particularly at Cardiff, is not that strong in terms of its work with private and commercial organisations. And yet there is a great opportunity there for us to think about how we can work closely together, how we might develop, how we go about our research in different ways and how we work more effectively and undertaking and generating new knowledge, but also in thinking about how we generate impact from our research. And again, commercial organizations are really good at that side of the work, because of course they have to work with consumers. They have to demonstrate the outcome of their research and development activities, something that we've not really had to do until more recent years. And even there, it's largely a very straightforward form of impact where it's one-way dissemination. So again, developing new ways of impact on there. Business relationships then is quite good. Supporting for using data is a good example. Training. So some really nice ideas emerging here. So thanks for that. We're now going to go on the other way around and flip it around. So the next one is where I'm going to ask you to name the 3 things that you think you most could contribute to sbarc. Now, remember, sbarc is other organizations as well as the research community. So it's about what you would bring to the community, the wider community. So again, we shouldn't forget that the interactions is simply not just between you and academics, but it's between you, academics, and other members of the Social Science Research Park. And of course, that's one of the benefits of bringing so many different organizations. Again, if you're third sector or public sector or private sector organizations, actually coming into a space where you're all co-located, working together with researchers as well, and how you might benefit from that. So again, this is for you to contribute, identify the things that you think you can bring to the table. I think it's very important to recognise that, of course, that many external organisations will be working with many academics and many universities. This is not just your only relationship. So we've got to find, what is it unique about this relationship that we want to foster? but also recognizing that you've got to be quite agile too, and you'll want to work with others around that. And we're not here to kind of close off those networks. We're simply part of a node of a wider network of activity you might be engaged in. So we're keen to use you as networks to other networks and nodes into other networks too, and bringing those expertise in from outside. And conversely, for us to share our research and expertise beyond even our members and outside into the wider community. So some great things being suggested here. Expertise, key element for us. How we use that expertise, how we identify it, and how we then work with it would be very important. Employee relationships, the social value and school value. I saw there's a lot of examples there about working with our students, which I think is great. How you might support them in what they're doing, both in terms of extracurricular, but also in their curricular experiences of the university. So again, some really great ideas there, really valuable for us to see what's going to be valuable to us and how we're going to benefit from it. And it's this kind of conversation we will probably end up having with potential partners in terms of what do you want from us and what do we think we can get from you and what can you offer, and therefore we can then generate and ensure that we have that value in that contribution so you can become fully pledged members of the Social Science Research Park. So lastly, it's just another opportunity here if you've got other suggestions for what we should consider in our membership. And this is a good opportunity now where you can begin to ask some questions of us and the panel about what you don't like, what you're worried about, what you would hope to see, what's perhaps not been included so far. So again, you can use either the chat function on the Zoom or the Q&A on the Zoom, or you can use Mentimeter on your mobile, on your smartphone, and you can just type in your comments or suggestions here. And we'll begin to start taking some of those questions, and we'll ask the panel if they wouldn't mind responding to those. So just an opportunity now for you to invite you to just any questions you might have about the Social Science Research Park so that we can begin to answer those now for you. What we'll do is we'll get a few comments up here and suggestions, and then I'll invite Dave and Andy to respond to some of these and see which ones they think would be really interesting to pursue, or how we might go about kind of fulfilling those kind of suggestions. So Andy, Dave, you begin to scan what's coming up, maybe identify ones that you think, oh, that looks like interesting. I've got something to say about that. It seems to be going to be quick because they disappear quickly. Sorry about that, everybody.
So while they're scrolling then, just one observation, something I meant to cover in my intro, but was this idea of this not being a zero-sum game, so actually people can contribute relatively little, all parties can contribute relatively little, and actually you could get a particularly large result out of that. You could get a lasting relationship, you could get some tangible business benefit, you could get a high impact publication. This, I really firmly believe this, people should be looking at that as it's a good opportunity for a small investment to have a potentially big impact, or of course nothing. It might be that you're not lucky.
Or just test the water. It may just be testing the relationship to see what might emerge. That's right.
Yes.
And is there anything on there that you think that you want to respond to?
Sorry, was that to me, Chris?
Yeah, Andy. Is there anything you can spot there?
I think actually that interesting idea on the right-hand side there about this entrepreneur support and business clubs. I think this could actually be a great way. I mean, you've got myself and Dave who work for quite big businesses with IBM and DSV, but I know already there's lots of smaller organisations around Wales and the UK, especially at the moment, as a lot of people are being very entrepreneurial. The world is changing very quickly. I could see sbarc being a great way to get small, medium-sized and big companies together to try and think how could they work together to create some new innovation. So I think that's a real interesting idea, actually, Chris, that we should look at.
Yeah. There's a question about how we're planning to engage with the local community that surrounds the building, and I think that's a good question. So I'll answer that one. At the moment, we've got the construction company, Bouygues, who are running the building construction. They have a quite a significant local community kind of program of activities already. So they're doing quite a lot of work with local schools. There's lots of apprenticeships, there's lots of school placements going on within the construction side of it. But then we'll be developing, as we get closer to occupation, we'll be thinking about how do we do things with the local community as a kind of group of tenants, if you like, in the building. So we'll be keen to develop a kind of partnership with local communities. The building will be open and encouraging people to come in. The coffee facility, for example, will be open to the local community. They'll be able to come in. The events that will be on in the event space will mostly be open. It's designed to be that way. But also things like the Remaker Space Centre, which really nice idea here is there's a local repair cafe that runs in Cathays. Currently, I think they use the one of the buildings in Cathays for that every few weeks in a weekend. Well, the Remaker Space will have some great facilities and great resources where we could consider opening that up at weekends or evenings, where people can then come and use those great facilities for the repair cafe. We might be able to run things from our visualization lab, for example, where we can invite local community groups in to talk about various things. I mean, I'm imagining lots of events will be held in the building, which will involve local communities coming in and organisations coming in. But a key part will be working with local schools. I mean, there's primary schools on the doorstep, and there's a Cathays High School, which is literally just only a few minutes walk away. And we're beginning to think about how we might work with those schools and the young people, particularly, largely because there's a lot of research centres in the building which will have a child-centred focus. So there's a lot of opportunities there for us to work with those local communities through the young people. Anything else there, Dave and Andy, that you want to pick up on?
So the schools discussion is really relevant, I think, because there's at least a twofold impact there. One is that, obviously we might get some really interesting ideas from that demographic, from that generation, because they see the world fundamentally differently. And the other is, of course, presenting a role model or an aspirational experience to them, so that they know these kinds of things exist, and hopefully they will be there when they graduate and decide what they're going to do in the future. I think as well, for the teachers, feeling supported, as long as it comes across as a good beneficial bonus thing to do that's on the doorstep. I just think that's a really good story all round.
There's a nice question about I think the geography of this. So are we interested in Cardiff, local community, Wales? And the point is, we've been working with the university on this for quite a few years, actually. What we think is a multi-scale role that this Cardiff University has. We have a very strong local civic role in Cardiff, but we also have a very important Wales-wide role because of our relationship, particularly with the Welsh Government. But we also have significant UK-wide research, and many of our research centres work across international networks where we work on international projects with international partners, with international funding. So my argument would be that sbarc wants to operate in all those scales as best it can. We're not going to privilege one particular kind of relationship over another, but a key thing is how we can use Cardiff as if you like, as a benchmark for what we might learn internationally, and equally what we might learn internationally, and bring it to Cardiff. So actually bring those and traverse those scales effectively in our research, which is, and then again, another very exciting opportunity that Cardiff is pursuing. Okay, we've only got 1 or 2 minutes left. So this is really great having some of these suggestions come in. What will happen is we're able to keep these ideas, we'll be able to take them off to the Mentimeter, we'll be able to look at them and be able to feed this into our membership model as we go forward. And then what we'll probably do over the next 12 months is constantly have these kinds of debates and meetings where we'll be working with external partners in taking some of our ideas forward. So Dave and Andy, thank you very much for your participation this morning. It's really good of you to join us, and it was really nice to hear what you had to say. Thank you everybody for joining us this morning, and thank you for participating in particular. When we close this call, it will end very abruptly. You will be diverted to a survey which is organised by Aspect. It invites you just to give some feedback on the session, so Aspect can take that on board in developing its future events. It should take less than a minute, so please, if you wouldn't mind to do that when you're diverted to that feedback survey. And all it requires me to say is thank you very much for your time, and I look forward to speaking to you all again about sbarc. Thank you.